afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular Friday program of the City Club of Portland. I am Bill Lesh, your president, and I'd like to issue a special welcome to those of you here that are members of the World Affairs Council and also all of the guests of both organizations. We have a special joint meeting today, and I can tell by the turnout that either you're very interested in the program or you just don't like hanging out on our rainy day. Whatever your reason, I do think we have a very exciting program today. Next Friday, we have a very exciting program. Those of you who came to the first in the series of Fast Forward in the year 2000 may remember an economist who lived in Seattle talking about all of the Californians moving to Oregon and that we were going to have to cope. That we probably were not going to be able to count on a second coming of Tom McCall to solve the problem for us, that we would probably have to do some additional planning. Interestingly enough, our speaker next Friday is Michael J. Parks, who is publisher of Marple's business newsletter. He will discuss the implication of the new immigration to this region and is the second in the series of looking forward to the year 2000. Also at that meeting, we will have a presentation, debate, and vote on a committee report which should be very interesting on citing locally undesirable regional facilities. Those are known warmly in the planning sectors as NIMBYs, not in my backyard. So if you're interested in where the next prison, dump, or other assorted facilities are going to go, you might want to read that report and come and debate it. Next week's program is special and related to our membership winter campaign in that all guests will be admitted for the membership price. Members and guests attending that program are encouraged to come early because guests arriving before noon will be eligible to win a year's membership in the City Club. And I think that that is special enough that you should try and bring 3 or 4 friends. I know I have a couple of people lined up. Unfortunately, the staff has told me that my guests are not eligible, so I'm not sure how I can talk them into coming, but I'll twist their arms anyway. I would urge you to bring a guest, and I would urge you to invite them to join the City Club. I happen to think it's one of the most fun and interesting places that you can participate and give something back to your community. 2 weeks from today, our program will focus on developments in Eastern Europe. In a statement or understatement here, one of the many areas of rapid change throughout the world, my script says. Richard Spielman, who is Assistant Professor of International Studies at Lewis and Clark College and an Eastern European specialist, will be our special speaker. Those 2 programs will be here in the Mayfair room of the Benson Hotel. I'm delighted to have Greg Noakes sitting on my far left from the World Affairs Council here with us today. Greg is the Assistant Managing Editor of the Oregonian, member of the World Affairs Council Board of Trustees, and co-chair of its program committee. It is with their help that this program is being brought to us today. He will ask the first question as our board host. Those of you in the audience that desire to ask questions, that opportunity is reserved to members of the World Affairs Council and the City Club. We will have a microphone in the center of the room, and we urge those of you who are brave to ask a question at the microphone. Those of you who are shy, there are forms on your tables that you can ask a written question. Please hold those written questions up, and the staff will bring them forward during the question and answer period. And needless to say, questions always end in a question mark. People ask me why I say that all the time, and the reason is that every now and then we get someone who wants to debate the speaker, and you have to use another forum for that, unfortunately. Our speaker today is very special and comes from an area in which there has been a great attention focused, especially since the events in China have affected how they have been able to govern the colony of Hong Kong. He is Mr. Peter Y.F. Low. He is the Minister of Hong Kong Economic and Trade Affairs and is stationed in Washington, D.C. And Mr. Low explained very kindly to me that he works for the government of Hong Kong through the British Embassy, but it is in fact the government of Hong Kong for whom he works. He graduated from Hong Kong University in 1967 and on graduation joined the Hong Kong Government Trade Department, and by 1979 had risen to the position of Assistant Commissioner of Trade. He was appointed Principal Assistant Secretary for Economic Services in 1982. In 1984, he moved to Washington, D.C. when he became counselor for the Hong Kong Commercial Affairs Department of the British Embassy. His responsibilities cover not only the United States but also Canada. Will you help me welcome, speaking on Hong Kong in the 1990s, the challenges ahead, Mr. Peter Low.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for your very kind words of welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, I suppose a lot of you might have heard about the so-called Hong Kong's brain drain. So with your indulgence, I would like to start with relating to you an interesting question which I came across a few months ago. This question, when it was raised, I didn't have the immediate answer. The question was, what do men in West Berlin, in Hong Kong, in Bangkok have in common? I couldn't answer that. So the answer given to me was they all wake up in the middle of the night. If you probably have read from the Time magazine, there was this article about men in West Berlin. Before the crumbling of the Berlin Wall, these men took advantage of one-day visit visa, crossing East Berlin and rendezvous with their mistresses, knowing full well that because of the Berlin Wall, their mistresses would never have any opportunity to be in front of their doorsteps. Now, the wall is crumbled. These men, they are worried. They woke up in the middle of the night, worry about their mistresses showing up in front of their doorsteps, worry about their marriages likely to be on the rocks. So they wake up in the middle of the night. Men in Hong Kong, what happened? As you probably know, a lot of men, they have sent their wives and children and family to Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, even the United States, part of the brain drain. But they themselves, these men return to Hong Kong and work because of the employment opportunities there. But their wives in Vancouver, in Toronto, they think it's better to ring them in the middle of the night to make sure that they will be faithful and will not cheat on them. So they wake up in the middle of the night. Now, men in Bangkok, what happened? There was a survey some months ago about men in Bangkok. Why do most of them wake up in the middle of the night? The survey showed 7% wake up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom. 11% wake up, go to the kitchen to have something to eat. The remaining 82%, poor souls. They wake up, they get dressed, they go back home to meet their wives. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today, not least because I have been looking forward to visiting what Newsweek has called one of America's hot cities. Hong Kong and Portland are alike in this respect, both being among the dynamically expanding economies of the Pacific Rim. Small though it is, Hong Kong, with no natural resources except its hardworking and resilient labor force, has become the 11th largest trading entity in the world. It therefore identifies very closely with Portland's ethos. Good citizens are the riches of a city. You have asked me, Bill, to talk about how we in Hong Kong view our future through the transition to Chinese sovereignty in 1997 and beyond. It would not be honest of me to say that all is entirely well. As you are aware, the Sino-British Joint Declaration on the Future of Hong Kong, signed in 1984 and registered at the United Nations, restored sovereignty over Hong Kong to China as of July 1997, but accorded the territory the status of special administrative region of China. Under this arrangement, Hong Kong will be granted autonomy in economic, trade, financial, and monetary fields, and will be allowed to retain its legal and judicial systems, its rights, its freedoms, and capitalist style for 50 years after 1997. It is inevitable, despite this legally binding agreement, that Hong Kong people should feel apprehensive about their future. Even in the best of circumstances, the concept of one country, two systems is a unique experiment whose viability has to be tested and proved in practice. But uncertainty notwithstanding, in the years after the declaration was signed, with much goodwill on all sides, enormous progress was made in preparing Hong Kong for its new status. The economy boomed and Hong Kong prospered. Then came June 4 and Tiananmen Square. What happened in Peking brought about a crisis of confidence in Hong Kong. In the weeks following, the mood was despondent. But within a short time, Hong Kong was demonstrating its legendary resilience in the face of adversity. Let me review first the immediate economic impact on Hong Kong. The stock exchange index has always been our very sensitive economic barometer, so no surprise that equities shed a third of their value in May and June last year. Property values dropped an estimated 15 to 20%. Consumer spending fell in June when no one was in the mood of spending. Many foreign tourists canceled their trips to China. Both hotel occupancy rates and retailing suffer as a result. But significantly, there was no panic. An orchestrated run on the Bank of China group of banks caused some short-term liquidity problems. This was dealt with by the rest of the banking system and by government intervention. The Hong Kong dollar exchange rate stays stable, thanks largely to its link with the US dollar. And our financial institutions, newly strengthened since the turmoil in October 1987, absorbed the strain without difficulty. Since June, things has improved. The stock market index has climbed steadily, and the volume of trading has increased. Consumer spending has recovered, and on the whole, life has returned back to normal. In fact, those of you who know Hong Kong well will find that it is the same hustling, bustling business capital of the Far East. The impact on confidence has also been felt in another way. After June 4, long queues formed outside the consulates in Hong Kong. Many who had previously hesitated submitted applications for immigration. The search for insurance policy in the form of foreign passports intensified. We estimate that about 55,000 people will emigrate this year, more than double the average for the past for the first half of the decade. We anticipate it may increase further, but there are limits to this. Limits imposed, for example, by countries' immigration quotas. Clearly, we do not welcome the fact of these departures. Equally clearly, the Hong Kong government will not attempt to stem this flow. We value our freedoms. One of these is the freedom to come and go from Hong Kong at will. What we must do instead is to make sure that no difficulties are placed in the way of those who want to come back after they have secured their insurance policy, that is, obtaining foreign passports. We must also, in cooperation with the private sector, find ways of managing these problems. Yes, the description of brain drain is all too apt. Not all who go are graduates, but certainly a disproportionate number are young professional families. We are therefore looking for ways to compensate. In the short term, the Hong Kong government must be flexible in allowing immigration of highly skilled personnel from overseas to fill the gap. There is also now a special scheme to import about 3,000 skilled workers at the technician, craftsman, and supervisory levels to relieve the pressure in these areas. In the medium term, we are looking for an increase in the return flow of these former Hong Kong residents who have obtained foreign passports. Already there are many thousands of former Hong Kong residents who have come back to Hong Kong to live and work after studying or living abroad. In the next few years also, we plan to more than double the number of first-degree places from 7% to 18%, of the relevant age group between now and 1995. There will be a similar increase in the number of places in technical training centers. The British government is also doing its part to solve the problem of emigration of talented people from Hong Kong. They propose to grant full UK passports to 50,000 families in the categories of most value to the community and most susceptible to emigration. This is in the hope not that they will leave Hong Kong, but that they will stay, secure in the knowledge that they have a right of abode elsewhere should they ever need it. Well, unfortunately, bad news is always more beloved of the media than good. Even so, those of you who scan the business pages will know that Hong Kong is not losing all its human or financial capital. Quite the reverse, in fact. Investment, much of it very long term, is still coming in from abroad. I have a few examples which illustrate that far-sighted, prudent businessmen recognize Hong Kong's potential. For example, US West, a very large American company, and Coditel of Belgium, together with Hong Kong interests, were the successful bidders in the franchise for Hong Kong's first cable television system. It will be the biggest in the world. The consortium will pledge, or has pledged, US $700 million towards its completion. Hong Kong International Terminals went to the market for US $1.35 billion loan for the construction of 2 new container terminals. The loan syndicate brought together Hong Kong, American, and Japanese interests. It was oversubscribed on issue. The third example, Citicorp has signed a deal for Hong Kong's largest, biggest ever floating rate of certificates of deposit, and the first issue of its kind to go beyond 1997. 22 international banks, 14 of them Japanese, joined the deal, and the response encouraged Citicorp to increase the size of the issue from US $77 million to US $92 million. Far from losing its appeal, Hong Kong continues to attract foreign firms from around the globe. Among those new manufacturing investment into Hong Kong in the last 8 months were 3 Japanese from Japan. Daido Concrete, Japan, 10 million. NEC, Japan, 4 million. Daiwa Steel, Japan, 6.4 million. United States, 3M, 4 million. Multiform, Australia, 1.2 million. Prominent among those who have recently set up regional headquarters in Hong Kong is Walt Disney. Others include Haynes Microcomputers, USA, which relocated from Singapore. McDonnell Douglas, relocated from Shanghai. And Johan, a large Japanese retail group, moved its headquarters from Japan to Hong Kong. The reasons people come are simple. First, there is location. We are the hub of Southeast and East Asia. Second, we have an open and impartially administered economy. Our taxes are low, simple, and stable. Our legal system is familiar to the international businessman and accessible to all. There are no special deals for anybody coming to Hong Kong. You rent your office, you plug in your phones, fax, and portable computers. You register as a businessman, all of that before lunch, and in the afternoon, you start business. What has worked for manufacturing has worked for finance and professional services. The last 15 years have seen Hong Kong blossom into one of the world's leading international financial centers. Again, location has helped. We complete a 24-hour, so-called 24-hour global market, in the sense that opening just after New York closes and closing only after London has started trading. Our communications are now second to none. Our knowledge of international markets and business practices is extensive. Our workforce highly trained and highly motivated. Our market is not over-regulated. We have no exchange control. Nowhere works as hard or as fast as Hong Kong. So what of our future? What is it that worries people? As I have said, it is the question in people's mind over whether the arrangements for the future laid down in the 1984 Sino-British Agreement will work out in practice. It is not so much that people fear for Hong Kong's economic future. Rather, they are afraid that the government post-1997 will be more intrusive, and the personal freedom they at present enjoy may be eroded. It is for this reason that the process of democratic reform is regarded as so important in Hong Kong, and why the most appropriate pace, direction, and structure of reform are now so hotly debated in Hong Kong. The Chinese government, as you know, has been engaged in writing and consulting the people of Hong Kong on the basic law. This is the Hong Kong's constitution after 1997. The final version is due to be promulgated next month. A key area of the basic law is the chapter on the post-1997 political structure. These provisions will have a very crucial effect on what Hong Kong people think about the basic law as a whole and how they view their future. Of no less interest will be plans to be announced by the British and Hong Kong governments for constitutional developments before 1997. In taking our decisions on this, we must take full account of the evolution of opinion and aspirations in Hong Kong. I'm sorry, Bill, I'm skipping 1 or 2 pages because I'm conscious of the fact that it's a bit too long. After the tragic events in Peking in June, Hong Kong are naturally worried about the effects on our important economic relations with China. The good news for us is that trade across the border with Guangdong province has continued almost unaffected. The Chinese government has repeated its intention to continue with its open economic policies. For Hong Kong, could generate roughly one third of China's total foreign exchange. This is vitally important. Hong Kong survives above all because it is useful to China. Our plans for the future take as their starting point that this will continue. I would like to give you some idea of the scale of these plans. The focal point of Hong Kong's economy is the port. The speed with which southern China has developed is staggering. We have to plan not only for our own growth, but also in the longer term for continuing growth across the border. We have to plan for Hong Kong as the super port of the Pearl River Delta. Nature has equipped us well for this role, but already both port and airport are reaching capacity. We must therefore improve on this nature's gift. We have decided to replace the existing airport at Kai Tak with a new one built on a massive land reclamation just north of the island of Lantau in the west of the territory. This will be a twin runway airport of the highest international standard. It will take 80 million passengers every year, more than 3 times the capacity of the existing airport. It will also spare pilots and passengers. I'm sure for those who have been to Hong Kong, you will see this swooping right-hand turn over the rooftops of Kowloon City, which has previously got their adrenaline, and I'm sure some of yours, running just before touchdown. The new airport will be connected to the city by a 6-lane highway and rapid transit system. 25 minutes is all it will take to snake through a string of bridges and tunnels to the hotels and convention centers in the heart of Hong Kong. Work on the expansion of the port will also go on in parallel with the work on the airport. A breakwater will be built between two of our islands to double the sheltered area of our natural harbor. New container terminals and multi-story, multi-purpose cargo terminals will be built near the Kowloon Peninsula and on the northeast coast of Lantau. These will be capable of handling all the projected growth in ocean-going, coastal, and river traffic. It is a huge project, even by Hong Kong standards, and we have carried through some massive developments over the last 15 years. At current prices, these new infrastructural projects will be of the order of US $16 billion. There is more to come. Once the replacement airport opens in 1997, Kowloon Bay, that's around the old airport, can be reclaimed and the whole of the section of the city replanned. Height restrictions which have imposed development in that part of the city under the flight path can also be lifted. The redevelopment of this and other parts of the city will keep our planners, our architects, our construction engineers and contractors busy well into the 21st century. True to our open economic policies, the rest of the world and its architects, engineers, financiers, contractors are welcome to join in. Mr. Chairman, Hong Kong has taken some hard knocks this past year. In its history, they are not the first, nor, I'm sure, they will be the last. We have overcome worse in the past and emerged the stronger for it. Despite the trauma of June, we have again bounced back. We are busy in strengthening our social, legal, and political institutions. We are trying to build a long-term relationship with China, genuinely beneficial to both sides. And we are building with determination and speed for the new opportunities, which we know are there in our future. Of course, there are risks, but there is always enormous potential in a successful post-1997 Hong Kong. And intrinsically, Hong Kong ethos accords with that of Douglas MacArthur, who said, "There is no security on this earth. There is only opportunity." Hong Kong, ladies and gentlemen, if I may say, is a land of opportunity. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lowe wanted me to be sure to let you know he is married and has 2 children and sleeps through the night. The microphone is being placed in the center of the room. I would ask those of you who want to ask a question to use the microphone and introduce yourselves and your membership either in City Club or World Affairs Council. For those of you, again, with written questions, please hold them up so the staff can bring them forward. The opportunity for the first question goes to Gregory Noakes.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, during the course of your talk, you said the process of democratic reform is regarded as very important in Hong Kong. I have a question about the elections that were planned. It's my understanding that originally there was a plan to elect a significant portion of the ruling council so that elections and a representative government could carry over after 1997, but those plans have been watered down and postponed. Can you tell me what that's about, sir?
Thank you. Basically, let me back up a little bit. There was one proposal from Hong Kong that the legislature should be elected in a manner starting from 1991. Next year we have this to have the direct election of 30%, directly elected. And then 1995 increased to 50%. And then in the year 2003, it would be 100% fully elected. Under the basic law which is being drafted, yes, you're right, the proposal as it stands now, but it's still a proposal, as I said, because it was hammered out by a subgroup, a technical subgroup. It was last month. The direct election proportion starting from 1997 would be 30%, and then increasing to 2003 to 50%. So there is a gap at the moment. But as I said, it is a subgroup's proposal, and there will be a plenary session of this drafting committee to take place later this month. And even after that, the whole package by this entire plenary session would have to go up to the National People's Congress. And the intention is to have the final draft promulgated around March, April. But if I may say a little bit on that to explain our present thinking. I would like to refer to a very balanced article which was, I think, published in Financial Times on January 23rd, and that's titled called "Not Armageddon Yet," because there was this talk about that the gap between this, or the ability to have this convergence, might have some sort of confidence erosion effect. But that well-balanced article really stipulated that the important thing is not the numbers. At least, well, it's important, but it is not the overriding phenomenon. What is more important is this element of continuity and not disruption. Now, this is their balanced article, not from a Hong Kong government point of view. So I would draw your attention to the fact that despite this discrepancy or the gap, there are balanced thinkers who view that, after all, we still have some way to go before a final blueprint is promulgated.
Gee whiz. Audience this size and you're all shy. Well, at least we have one or two questioners here with written questions, and I will take the opportunity while Mr. Greening goes to ask the first one, and that is, would you characterize the government of China and perhaps the second tier that may take over at some point in the near future, and how the Hong Kong government views the relationship in the future with a changing Chinese government?
Yes, at this stage, presumably a lot of you are aware that in China they are now undergoing this economic retrenchment. But this economic retrenchment could not go on indefinitely. Basically, as you would probably know, this retrenchment is not an outcome of June 4 events. It's an outcome of economic problems because of the economic open door during the past decade. So it is a dose of medicine which presumably after the problems have been addressed will be lifted. So in the longer term, China must continue with its open policy, economic reforms. And as I mentioned in my presentation, there is a very close economic interdependence between Hong Kong and China. As I remember, I said that Hong Kong accounted for 1/3 of China's total foreign exchange earnings. And this being the case, and in the full anticipation that China will continue to open up and continue to trade with the world, despite current economic aberrations as resulted from the retrenchment, I'm sure that the economic cooperation between China and Hong Kong will continue.
Chip Greening, City Club member. Recognizing that you have said that China must in the long term continue with its economic reforms, it appears, at least in the short term, that there are two opposing forces in conflict. On the one hand, China, while having some economic reforms, has shown an implacable attitude toward democratic freedoms in its comments on the changes in Eastern Europe and in the events following Tiananmen Square. On the other hand, we have a document, the Sino-British Pact, under which China purports to guarantee certain democratic and economic freedoms to Hong Kong after 1997. For those of us who aren't familiar with the interplay between the Basic Law and the Sino-Chinese Pact, I question just what enforcement abilities the British government has in enforcing the freedoms guaranteed in the pact, what leverage the British government has in trying to get those freedoms established in the Basic Law, and therefore, and finally, what ability the Chinese government has after 1997, once the Basic Law is agreed to simply change it all and toss out the things that it doesn't like once it's in control.
I think if I may say, in this world, there is no lifetime guarantee. You cannot point out any country in this world and say how long its present economic system and political system will continue to prevail. I agree that while the joint declaration was signed, ratified, and registered with the United Nations, it could never be considered as a lifetime guarantee. Anything can happen. But in practice, I think we have to look at it this way. Historically, China has, even during the height of its turmoil, say in the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, because of that sort of political turmoil, it could have told the British government that we want Hong Kong back. So actually in those days there was this sort of political uncertainty, but China didn't do so. I think it rests with economic pragmatism, could translate into political pragmatism. And again, if I may hark back to what I said, basically it is because of the value of Hong Kong to China economically, and economically also politically, because I must say, I don't know whether I have said it, that apart from the tangible economic assets and values, Hong Kong is China's window on the world. It relies on Hong Kong for its modernization program. I think I mentioned that we have got all the infrastructure, we have got communications, we have got managerial experience and expertise. If China were to continue, and I'm sure it would like to continue to modernize, it will rely on Hong Kong. It has to rely on Hong Kong. The question is, would it ever consider killing the goose that laid the golden egg? I doubt, because history has shown that if it would really like to obtain Hong Kong, or us Britain to return Hong Kong to China, it can do so anytime. Therefore, I would like to hark back, as I said, economic pragmatism has been translated and will be translated into political pragmatism. Thank you.
My name is Gilbert Lamb, member of the City Club of Portland and the World Affairs Council. My question is, does China still control the water supply to Hong Kong? And are they liable to maybe shut it off like they did in '64, where people were lined up at a water hydrant for a quarter of a mile and longer to get water?
If I may give you the actual facts, they didn't turn off. And the situation was not 1964. It was 1966 and 67. I remember in 1967, the water supply situation was in such a dire state that people got supply 4 hours every 4 days. And you can imagine the good business of those plastic containers manufacturers. Overnight, they churn out through them big plastic extrusion machines, huge containers for people to store up water. But as I said, it was not because of China. It was because of the drought conditions, and because of, I admit there was turmoil because of Cultural Revolution. And it was lack of communications between the Hong Kong government and the Guangdong officials. To answer your question, yes, we rely on probably some 60% of our total supply, water supply from them. Am I right, Peter? Yes, 60%. But since 1966, we have never encountered a similar situation. And in recent years, we have got complete cooperation from the Guangdong officials to invest in machinery and equipment to supply more water to Hong Kong to meet the increasing demand. Again, as I said, economic pragmatism.
Roger Bachman, member. When I was in Hong Kong almost 3 years ago in May '87, I was shocked to read in the newspaper a ruckus about the censorship of movies that would be allowed to be shown. And it was the British Governor General who was doing it. And I didn't stick around long enough to find out what the outcome was. Could you fill me in and let me know about any other sorts of violations of what we would consider civil liberties through censorship?
You're referring to the film censorship or the... But I would imagine that it is not censorship per se. It is a gradation system ensuring that movies would be classified into various categories, like what is being done in the United States. Of course, we don't have, say, X-rated or R-rated, but basically it's the gradation system for the purpose of ensuring that viewers would be properly guided. When you ask about other areas, I think there was one area which probably was redressed. It was in connection with the press. There was a very archaic provision which was never implemented or never enforced. That was in the old archaic legislation that provided for taking action against the media, which reported on certain malicious and unfounded rumors. But this was repealed, I think probably in 1988. So to answer your question, I think I can say that we do not have any violations.
I was very intrigued to, Ed Gilbert, both City Club member and World Affairs Council. I was very intrigued to hear your discussion of the argument that China would not kill the goose that laid the golden egg. And I was curious if you would talk for a little bit about the similarities between Hong Kong in 1997 and Shanghai in 1949. Many of the same arguments were made at that time period that, of course, China would not do anything to harm Shanghai, their window on the world, the center of their commerce, the city that was so important to their connections with the rest of the world. Many outside viewers, and I used to reside in Hong Kong until 1987, feel that the similarities are very strong, that in fact, although no one would in the right mind kill the goose that laid the golden egg, that in fact the Chinese authorities have shown themselves quite able to do lots of things that defy rational explanation.
I can understand the tendency or the rationale, but let me give you some facts. Shanghai, yeah, I agree. Many people say that it's still relatively a gray city. But if you try to compare Hong Kong with Shanghai come 1997, I think you're trying to compare apple with oranges. Look at Hong Kong's strategic position. Look at Hong Kong's economic fundamentals. As I said earlier, Hong Kong is now the world's 11th largest economic trading entities. Look at our infrastructure. Look at our strategic geographical position. ingredients or these strengths of Hong Kong cannot be easily ignored by China if it will continue with its modernization program. So, generally speaking, I don't think it is quite right to use Shanghai, although there's a temptation to do so, to compare Shanghai with Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong we have got a lot of attributes, a lot of ingredients, a lot of favorable factors which did not exist in Shanghai.
Member of both organizations. Mr. Low, I have a question for you about the future for many of the citizens who want to immigrate from Hong Kong. One of the proposals recently, when there were discussions in Washington with President Bush about this issue, one of the focuses of the discussion was whether the United States, and this was kind of a trial balloon floated, might consider guaranteeing passports or the right of immigration to employees of American firms. That didn't seem to fly in Washington. But the question is, to what extent is that being raised with other Commonwealth countries or other countries around the world? Is it, and you may not want to name names, but is it an active issue, and what prospects do you foresee?
I don't think it is appropriate at this stage yet to say that that trial balloon didn't fly. As a matter of fact, during the past couple of weeks, I personally have been in discussion, not at my initiative, but congressional staffers in the House in particular have been ringing me to discuss this issue. As you probably know, the Senate Simpson-Kennedy Act on immigration was passed in July last year. And what is now required is the House to move its version. And of course, the House version apparently is moving rather slowly for certain reasons which some of you will know, but I don't think it is right for me to comment. It's only for domestic political reasons. But there is now a genuine interest on the part of certain very enlightened congressmen in the House, thinking of not only passing a resolution. As a matter of fact, a resolution has been drafted, and it will be discussed soon within the House. A resolution containing provisions similar to what you have said, providing this sort of multinational initiative, granting right of vote to Hong Kong without the need for them to leave Hong Kong. But in addition to this proposed draft legislation, which of course is non-binding, there is now an attempt to consider whether these provisions in the resolution could be translated into legislative proposals. And as I said, I have been in discussion with some of these congressional staffers. And I think at this stage, it is still early to say what would be the likely outcome. But given the intensive interest, I think there will continue to be a lot of discussions. And I think probably I will continue to be in contact. Moving to the other areas, you are aware that Canada, I mentioned in my talk, the United Kingdom's move already. In Canada, they have already, the Canadian government has always adopted a fairly open immigration policy, definitely more liberal than what is under the present system in the United States. Last year, 25,000 visas were issued, and probably this amount would continue. And likewise, in New Zealand, in Australia, there have been talks about increasing the immigration quota. But to respond to your question, there has been a lot of discussion, and a lot of countries and their governments have been alive to this issue and has been most helpful in considering means of helping Hong Kong.
Dan Goldie, member of both organizations. I'm kind of surprised that no one has asked you thus far about the forced repatriation of the Vietnamese refugees in Hong Kong. And I would like to ask, would you give us an update? Will more of them be forcibly sent back to Vietnam? What is the status of those refugees at the moment?
Bill, do you have time for this? Because I can spend a few minutes. Thank you for the question. Yeah, a lot of you must have been made aware of the fact that on 12 December, Hong Kong sent back 51 Vietnamese boat people to Vietnam. And during that period, I personally had to more or less walk the hall of Congress. During those 2-3 weeks, probably I had no less than 30 to 40 meetings with individual congressmen, senators, and their staffers. Basically, is to explain the situation as to why we are in such a situation. We have to do something. First, it's last year, more than 38,000, probably 35,000 Vietnamese boat people reached Hong Kong shores. They came to Hong Kong not for the purpose of staying in Hong Kong, but for the purpose of eventually leaving for their preferred destination, mainly United States. And a lot of them have specifically mentioned they would like to come to America. But so far we haven't heard thinking of coming to Oregon. But mainly California. Now, unfortunately, the United States administration said they are not refugees. They could not qualify for resettlement purposes because 90% of these boat people, they came from North Vietnam. They are peasants, farmers, fishermen. So under the international covenant or the UN criteria, they are economic migrants. They are not political refugees. They cannot claim to have a well-founded fear of political persecution from the government of Vietnam. So using that as the criteria, countries like United States, Canada, and other destinations, they say, sorry, we couldn't take these people. But yet these people come to Hong Kong only for the purpose of leaving Hong Kong and coming to America and other countries. So basically, whereas Hong Kong has steadfastly and diligently abided by this first asylum principle, that is, we would never consider pushing these people out to sea, risking drowning. We have always received them, fed them, hoping that one of these days their forlorn hope would be met, that is, coming to America. But unfortunately, we can never get this criteria changed, that is, for United States receiving economic migrants, even though they are not political refugees. Now, the sailing season, which means the monsoon winds, will change come next month in the favor of these boat people. Because in the winter, the wind is blowing from the north, so it would not be prudent on their part to sail against the wind. But the wind conditions will change, will improve come next month. And as I said, last year we had more than 35,000 people. To give you a proportional idea, 35,000 people for a population of Hong Kong of 5.7 million, this number is equivalent to 1.2 million people sailing up the New York harbor. So this gives you this sort of proportionality. Now, the sailing season, as I said, resumes next month. We cannot afford to have another 35, 30, 36, or even 40,000 coming. Our resources are totally strained. Can we ask America to help? There was a very well-balanced editorial on New York Times. I think it was in the middle of December, shortly after this 51 Vietnamese boat people being returned to China. It was a very well-balanced article referring to, not my words, hypocrisy of the U.S. government. What can we do? There must be some international help. It is not Hong Kong's problem. It is international problem. It's easy to criticize and take the moral high grounds, but we need help. So I hope that in a nutshell, I do not want to to belabor on this point and bore you on. But basically, we need international help.
I love giving in the last question here, and we'll have to ask for a fairly brief answer. You spoke at length on the capital inflow into Hong Kong. We've heard a great deal about the number of immigrants moving into the Vancouver, Canada area and the tremendous investment going on. Would you characterize the extent of the outflow of capital from Hong Kong recently?
I would love to, Bill, but unfortunately we do not, as I said earlier, we do not have any exchange controls. We do not compile, the government do not compile statistics. Specifically, I'm unable to give you any figures, but of course, again, it would be dishonest for me to say that these people leaving Hong Kong would not take with them a considerable chunk of their capital. But what is important, I think, is that because of the nature of Hong Kong, because of our open economy, we practice open free trade, free enterprise. While on the one hand, we have this outflow, I agree, but we have to consider the other side of the equation, the inflow of capital. Now, I did mention Japanese investment, American investment. There are also a lot of hot money coming in from the neighboring regions. So if there were a net outflow in the form of capital flight, it would have by now been reflected in the state of our economy. But as I said, we are flushed with, well, a lot of companies trying to raise capital in Hong Kong. They have no problem doing so. So what I would like to suggest is don't look at just one side of the equation. That side of the equation would be applicable if the entire economic situation is such that capital flight has resulted in a serious erosion of our economic fundamentals. But so far, we have none of these indications. So I would suggest that we should look at the entire position, the entire situation before. And also one more point is, whereas the emphasis is on capital flight, but I would tend to argue that it is economic diversification rather than disinvestment at this stage.
Thank you. I'd like to also pass on our thanks to Portland State University, who has, through their International Studies program, organized the second conference on Soviet, Chinese, and East Asia experts, which is February 9th through 11th. Mr. Lowe will be participating this afternoon in that program. It's at Portland State. If you would like to participate, I'm sure we have more information in the back, and it is, according to this information, open to the public. I would also ask you to bring a guest next week for our special program featuring Michael Parks speaking on the new immigration and how we are going to deal with it. And thank you all for coming. We are adjourned.